The first time I heard those words, I was standing under the burning noon sun with grease on my hands, shame in my chest, and a past I had spent 10 years trying to bury. A little girl in a yellow dress looked up at me with eyes too serious for her age and said, "My dad wants to see you." And somehow, before I even asked her father's name, my heart already knew that life was about to open an old door I had locked from the inside. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that arrive when we least deserve them, please like, comment, share this story, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may need hope today. My name is Kairo Ven, and on that bright Wednesday afternoon, I was not the kind of man anyone came looking for with good news. I worked at a roadside garage on the edge of Millhaven, a sleepy town where the mornings smelled like baked bread and cut grass, and the afternoons shimmered with heat rising from cracked pavement. My shirt was stained, my boots were worn, and my reputation was worse than both. Years ago, people had known me as the boy who could fix anything with wheels. Then they knew me as the young man who ruined everything with one terrible decision. 10 years earlier, when I was 23, I had been reckless, angry, and proud. I drove too fast, spoke too sharply, and believed apologies were for weaker men. One rainy evening, after an argument with my best friend, Marcel Rowe, I sped away in his pickup. We had fought over money, over dreams, over nothing and everything. I lost control on a slick bridge and crashed into a delivery van. I survived with a broken arm and a scar across my ribs. The van driver, an older man named Oren Vale, survived too, but his legs never fully healed. Marcel lost his job because the truck was destroyed, and our friendship ended without goodbye. I went to jail for 18 months, came home quieter, and found the town had built a wall around me. So when the little girl came to the garage that afternoon, I thought she had the wrong man. Her name, she told me, was Safra, and she had walked from the clinic down the road because her father had seen me through the window when our tow truck passed. She said he had been sick for a long time, and he had whispered my name like it hurt him. I wiped my hands on a rag and tried to smile, but my mouth felt frozen. I asked who her father was, though I already felt the answer coming like thunder across a clear sky. She said, "Marcel Rowe." For a moment, the whole world went silent. The traffic, the tools, the radio in the garage, even the cicadas in the trees seemed to fall away. Marcel. The friend I had not seen since the night I destroyed his truck, his trust, and the life we once planned together. We had grown up like brothers, two boys sharing stolen mangoes, fishing rods, and impossible dreams. We used to say we would open the best repair shop in the county together. Instead, I opened a drawer full of guilt and never closed it. I followed Safra through the sunlit streets, past the bakery, past the churchyard, past people who looked at me and then looked away. She held a paper cup of water in both hands as if it were something precious. I noticed her shoes were too small, the straps tight against her feet, and I wondered what kind of illness had brought Marcel so low that his daughter had to come fetch a man like me. At the clinic, the air smelled of antiseptic and old fear. Safra led me to a small room where sunlight fell across a narrow bed, and there he was. Marcel looked nothing like the laughing boy from my memories. His face had hollowed, his beard was streaked with gray, and his hands, once strong enough to lift an engine block with me, rested thin and still on the blanket. But his eyes were the same. Tired, wounded, alive. When he saw me, he did not curse. He did not turn away. He only looked at me for a long time, and that silence hurt more than anger ever could. I wanted to speak first. I wanted to say I was sorry, that I had carried the crash inside me every day, that I had written letters I never mailed because forgiveness felt too expensive to ask for. But the words tangled in my throat. Marcel finally reached under his pillow and pulled out a folded photograph, faded at the edges. It showed us at 19, standing beside a half-rebuilt motorcycle, grinning like the whole future belonged to us. He pressed it into my hand and told me, in a voice rough as gravel, that he had not called me there to reopen the past. He had called me because he was dying, and his daughter had no one. I felt the room tilt. Safra sat beside the bed, swinging her legs, too young to understand how heavy the air had become. Marcel told me her mother had passed when Safra was 3. He had raised her alone while working small jobs, but kidney disease had stolen his strength month by month. There was an aunt in another city, but she had already refused to take the child. There were neighbors who brought soup, church women who prayed, and doctors who spoke gently, but no one who could promise to stay. Then Marcel said the sentence that broke something open in me. He said he knew I had failed him once, but he also knew I had spent 10 years trying to become someone different. I shook my head because I did not deserve that kind of trust. I told him I was the last man he should ask. I lived in a rented room above the garage. I had no family, no savings, and no right to stand in the place of anyone's father. But Marcel looked at Safra, then back at me, and said that sometimes the people most afraid of failing are the ones who try the hardest not to. He did not ask me to replace him. He asked me to help her finish growing up without feeling unwanted. That afternoon became the longest day of my life. Outside, the town moved normally beneath the golden heat. Cars stopped at lights, children bought ice cream, and someone watered flowers outside the clinic entrance. Inside, an old friendship lay between two men like a wounded animal. I sat beside Marcel's bed while Safra colored a picture of a house with a red roof. Marcel told me about her favorite books, her fear of thunderstorms, the way she hummed when she was nervous, and how she pretended not to like carrots but ate them if they were cut into stars. Each small detail felt like a sacred instruction. Each one made me more terrified. Over the next weeks, I visited every afternoon. At first, I told myself it was only for Marcel, a debt being paid in hours. But Safra began waiting for me by the clinic window, waving like I was someone worth seeing. I brought her sandwiches, repaired the wheel on her toy wagon, and taught her how to identify cars by the sound of their engines. She laughed when I got serious about spark plugs, and that laugh did something strange to the dark rooms inside me. It opened curtains. Still, the town did not make it easy. People whispered when they saw me walking with her. Some said Marcel must be desperate. Others said a man with my past had no business near a child. I pretended not to hear, but Safra heard more than I wanted her to. One afternoon, outside the pharmacy, a woman pulled her son closer as we passed. Safra looked up at me and asked why some people looked at me like I was dangerous. I could have lied. Instead, I told her I had made a terrible mistake when I was younger, and people remembered pain longer than they remembered change. She held my hand tighter and said maybe they needed better memories. Those words stayed with me. I began cleaning the room above the garage. I bought a second-hand bed with a carved wooden headboard and painted the walls soft green because Safra said green felt like morning. I fixed the broken window latch, replaced the old kettle, and set aside money from every repair job. For the first time in years, I was not merely surviving the day. I was preparing for tomorrow. Marcel noticed. On better days, he smiled. On worse days, he slept while machines breathed beside him. One bright Sunday near noon, he asked to go outside. The nurse rolled him into the clinic garden where sunlight spilled over marigolds and the air smelled of warm earth. Safra chased butterflies between the flower beds, her yellow dress flashing like a small flame. Marcel watched her with a love so fierce it seemed stronger than his failing body. He told me he had hated me for years. He admitted it plainly, without cruelty. He had blamed me when he lost his job, when bills swallowed him, when his wife cried over notices they could not pay. But hatred, he said, had become too heavy to carry while holding a child. Slowly, without telling me, he had let it go. I cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, but helplessly. Tears ran down my face in that public garden, under that honest daylight, and I did not wipe them away. I told him I was sorry. Not the thin sorry people use to escape consequence, but but the kind that comes from the bones. I told him I had been a coward, that I should have come sooner, that I should have faced him before sickness forced us into the same room. Marcel took my hand with what strength he had left and said forgiveness did not erase the crash, but it could stop the crash from being the only ending we remembered. 2 mornings later, Marcel passed away just after sunrise. By noon, the news had moved through Millhaven. The sky was painfully blue, the kind of beautiful day that feels almost insulting when grief arrives. Safra did not cry at first. She sat on the clinic steps with her father's photograph in her lap and stared at the road as if he might still come walking back from the corner. I sat beside her without speaking. After a long while, she leaned against my arm and whispered that she did not know where home was now. I told her, with a voice shaking under the weight of the promise, that if she wanted, home could be with me. The legal process was not simple. Papers, questions, inspections, interviews, doubts. Every mistake I had ever made seemed to rise from the grave and sit across from me in government offices. Some officials were kind. Some were suspicious. One asked why Marcel would trust me after what happened. I answered honestly because there was no better answer. I said maybe he saw not who I had been, but who I was still trying to become. The room went quiet after that. Weeks passed. Safra stayed temporarily with a nurse named Tavia who had loved Marcel like a younger brother. I visited every day after work. I helped with homework, packed lunches, learned the names of cartoon characters, and discovered that caring for a child was less like rescuing someone and more like being rescued one ordinary task at a time. On the day approval finally came, Safra ran across the courthouse steps in broad daylight and threw herself into my arms so hard I nearly fell backward. People watched. Some smiled. Some still judged. But for once, I did not shrink beneath their eyes. Years have passed since that day, and the garage is no longer just a garage. A painted sign hangs outside now, Rowe and Ven Repairs. Marcel's name comes first because it should have from the beginning. Safra is taller, louder, and convinced she knows more about engines than I do. Maybe she does. Every year on her father's birthday, we close shop at noon and take flowers to the garden behind the clinic. We sit in the sunlight, and I tell her stories about the young Marcel, the boy who could make anyone laugh, the friend who forgave what many would have buried forever. I still have bad days. Guilt does not vanish simply because life becomes kinder. Sometimes I wake before dawn hearing rain that is not falling, seeing headlights on a bridge that is no longer there. But then morning comes. Safra bangs around the kitchen, burns toast, asks where her school notebook is, and the present reaches back for me. Love, I have learned, does not always arrive as romance or reward. Sometimes it arrives as responsibility. Sometimes it wears a yellow dress and asks you to follow her to the place where your past is waiting. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your kindness helps these stories travel farther than we may ever know. Special request, comment I believe in second chances if you stayed until this moment. In the end, Marcel did not call me to his bedside to punish me. He called me there to give me one final gift, the chance to become worthy of the forgiveness I never thought I deserved. And every bright day when Safra laughs in the garage doorway, with sunlight on her face and her father's courage in her eyes, I understand that some meetings do not simply change your life. They return it to you.